cleaning her room one day, and she thought she was picking up a ribbon along her baseboard, and it actually wound up being a rat snake. And for a little while, I had a pet rat snake, and my mom wouldn't let me keep it in the house. So my 8th grade science teacher, shout out to him, was like, you can totally keep it in my classroom. I'll help you get like food for it and everything. And so he let me keep my snake in his classroom, and we just kind of had him for a little while, and he did die eventually. And then whenever I was older, I had fish and cats and dogs and all of that. And my oldest was at the time like 12 or 13. And he said, Mom, I really want a snake. Well, my cousin breeds ball pythons, or he did at the time. He was breeding ball pythons. And so I reached out to him, and he was like, yeah, let's do it. So I got one, and then I wound up, that one stayed in my 16-year-old's room. And I was like, you know what? I want my own snake. So I got my own snake. And then I got the theoretical corn snake from my cousin, who was a different cousin who was moving and couldn't keep reptiles in her new apartment. And then the rainbow boas are just something that they've been a dream snake ever since I wanted to keep snakes. So
I get to see my audience now like, oh my God.
Well, that's how everyone,
so terrified.
Yeah, that's how everyone feels. These are non-venomous. They're all very chill. Like if you hold them, well, except the corn snake, who is a live wire, but he doesn't like try to bite you or anything. They're just another kind of pet. People have fish, people have turtles. We do also have a turtle, but it's just one of those things. Some people like it, some people don't. And if you don't like it, that's okay.
Absolutely. So if you guys ever doubt what she's saying, just look at that kind face. That's not a face of someone that lies, okay?
Yes.
So I know we're going to speak about a beautiful topic. Mm-hmm. And a beautiful journey that's a little sad, but she's so much stronger because of it, right? Absolutely. So before we get into it, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and where everyone can find you?
Absolutely. So I am Momma FoxFire. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a single mom. I'm a mental health advocate. I'm a full-time proposal manager and a variety gamer. I have been through a lot in my life. However much we wind up covering today, I promise you there's more that I've been through, but all of that led to me raising awareness about mental health topics as an advocate. And I've been living with depression and anxiety on and off since 2015. My cat needs all of the attention. I'm still working to overcome CPTSD from an emotionally abusive marriage. I lived through postpartum depression. I also very strongly believe that if the stigma around mental health were minimized or eliminated altogether, my grandfather, who went missing in 2017, would still be alive today. So I have, in my downtime, I do run a podcast called Even Tacos Fall Apart, and you can find all of the details on tacosfallapart.org. And my goal there is to just kind of build a place where people can share information and stories similar to what you do, kind of the resources and the laughs. And I put in the work to open up those conversations and provide our community with and podcast guests kind of the grace and the space to work through their own shit on their own time. So I am Momma FoxFire on all socials, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. It's Momma FoxFire.
Beautiful. The second person I've interviewed that actually has a Twitter account. So I must say kudos for that, because I don't know many. Yeah, I've got Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, and I'm even on LinkedIn as Momma FoxFire. I try to be very consistent. Perfect. So take us through the genesis, because you mentioned that you had depression. You mentioned that there's an abusive marriage. Mm-hmm. So let's start from the beginning and get to know you. So how did this all start when you realized, hey, something in my life is not right, and you're going through all these different situations that aren't necessarily healthy for you?
Yeah. So I grew up pretty typical childhood. I mean, I've got 2 sisters, and everything was pretty normal. In 2006, I was 21, and I gave birth to my oldest, and I was a single mother, and I had pretty severe birthing trauma, and it's something that I strongly blame the hospital and the doctors for. Fortunately, my second birth was, while not perfect, still was something that was better than the first time around. So And from there, I got married in 2011 and became a stepmom and started to be in an abusive situation emotionally. In 2013, we had another baby. And that's, I would say in 2013 is really where I noticed mental health issues starting with postpartum depression, which at the time wasn't something that I thought you could talk about. I mean, 2013 doesn't sound that long ago, it was 10 years ago. But in the like ability to talk about things openly and honestly, we've come a long way, honestly, thanks to COVID. We've come a long way in a very short amount of time. So back then in 2013, it was still kind of a, we don't talk about this situation. So I would say really where I started noticing, of course, I think that they probably started before that, but where I started noticing it was kind of that postpartum depression piece in 2013, 2014.
I know for me, when I began to think about my mental health and my mental fitness was when I wanted to make my life better, where I knew a change was necessary.
Yeah.
And then the last couple of years, it was like, Terrain, you can't go anywhere. All you have is to think about what is going on in your life. And maybe there's some people that thought things were an issue that maybe weren't an issue years prior, but it raised awareness to everything that could have been an issue. So when you had your second child and you're like, hey, wait a minute, this marriage is not going the way I want it to go. Was it like a aha moment, or was it like a slow build to you discovering that this isn't working?
So as far as my marriage goes, like I think with the postpartum depression, I owe a huge debt of gratitude to my OBGYN because she asked the right questions at the time and got me was like, hey, you have postpartum depression, by the way, in a routine follow-up. And we were able to just treat that with medication and she was able to prescribe it. But kudos to her for identifying it, asking the right questions, getting me on some medication that really did help at that time. As far as my marriage goes, I would say I really started noticing that something was off probably around 2014, but I couldn't quite identify what it was. And really, I think more than saying something's wrong with my marriage, I was more thinking something's going on with my husband. And at that time, we were trying for another baby. We were having a hard time getting pregnant. And so I kind of chalked it up to, well, we're all having a hard time here. And it's kind of found out in 2015 that I was not going to be able to have more children and had to have a hysterectomy. But around that same time, I also found out that my ex was having an affair. And at the same time that I found out about the active affair, I found out about a second affair that he had had prior. So I was actually able to talk to his affair partner. And I asked her directly, I said, hey, do you know if he's had other affairs? And she said, yes. And I asked for some details to confirm. And it was true. She was not, I mean, why would she lie? Honestly, like she was already caught. Why would she lie more? So, but that's kind of whenever I first noticed that something was wrong in the marriage. I will say at that time, I did not recognize, I was not willing to recognize, probably I was being a little stubborn, that I was in something that was emotionally abusive. That would take probably 3 more years for me to really recognize and come to terms with through a lot of therapy.
I remember the first time when I discovered that I was in a relationship that you can consider to be emotionally abusive. It kind of caught me off guard.
Yeah.
Because here I am, probably my arrogance, right? This can't happen to me. I'm too strong for this. Mm-hmm. And then you realize it creeps up on you like a thief in the night, right?
Yeah.
You look around, you're like, me? Mm-hmm. I'm actually going through this. When it was discovered that you're being emotionally treated this way, there's 2 affairs. And now you want to transition out of that situation. Did you find it difficult to let go physically, or is it harder to let go maybe emotionally?
I think it was a little bit of both. So, we went through In back in 2015, we went through couples therapy together. He said the affairs were a mistake and all of this. And again, at that time, I didn't recognize what was going on around me because very similar to you, like I never saw myself as, oh, I'm that girl that's going to wind up in an emotionally abusive marriage. Well, I also never saw myself as that girl who would stay if someone cheats. And I did wind up staying in my head, rationalizing. I stayed for the kids. I highly discourage if you're in a relationship and you're staying for the kids, you are doing, and I did more damage to my kids than if I had left, because what you are doing is modeling to them a relationship that they are going to repeat later in life. And so if you're in something that is unhealthy and your only reason for staying is the kids, that is not good enough. But at the time, I rationalized, and we as humans are so good at rationalizing the shit out of whatever we want to have happen, right? So I still loved my husband. I thought he loved me. I loved my kids. I loved everything, so I was very good at rationalizing in my head, I'm going to stay in this situation. He's sorry about the affairs. We're going to go to therapy. We're going to go to this recovery program together. And this was when I first had my first exposure to therapy, and it was the worst experience with therapy. And I actually wound up not going to therapy for a couple of years after that. I didn't go back until 2017, because my therapist at that time, all she wanted to do was give me worksheets and say, well, you need to try harder, or those kinds of comments that were just very dismissive and not actually addressing anything as far as what I could do to help myself and help understand what I was going through and help my emotions. It was just like, do this worksheet and then we'll talk about it, I guess, next time. Kind of very, very dismissive. I think I went to her like 4 or 5 times, really only a handful of times. And then I was like, wow, therapy is really shitty. I'm not going back. Because I thought, what a therapist is a therapist is a therapist. And the reality is that that's not true.
Was there a type of help that you were wishing that you had? Maybe not from this person, but from someone else during that time?
So we also went through couples therapy, and I actually really liked couples therapy. The reason we didn't continue with couples therapy is that my ex, and he literally said this, I am not making this up. He said, we're not going to therapy anymore because I just can't win. And that was it. We stopped going. You can't force someone to go to therapy. I tried. You just can't. You can't force someone to go to therapy. You can't force them to work through whatever they don't want to work through. If they don't want to do the work, they're not going to do the work. So I really enjoyed the couples therapy. We did also do an affair recovery program. It was like emergency marital something or other, which was an online program. And it was specifically for couples who were going through betrayal and infidelity recovery. And I did enjoy that. I thought that they gave us a lot of space to connect with other couples who were going through something similar. I thought that that was really good. And we did go through that. Eventually he decided he didn't want to do that work either, though. So
sometimes it's just difficult to be told what you're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
But it's better to hear it from someone that is neutral. Like the therapist doesn't have any incentive to make something up.
Right.
Right. Despite the bad experience that you may have or the bad experience that he may have, it's someone saying that, hey, if the approach is right, not someone that's just throwing out worksheets like they're dollars at a gentleman's club, right? But
yeah,
we want to make sure that we're helping them out. We're saying that, hey, if you guys want to fix this, work needs to be done on both sides.
Absolutely.
But one thing I want to ask you, if we flash forward, is going through what you've gone through, how would you want to help someone who doesn't want to go through that, but they're on the verge of having a difficult relationship, whether it be a boyfriend, girlfriend, or husband or wife?
So I think something that would have helped me is hearing of more people who went through something like this, because I didn't recognize what was happening. Like I had been so cut off from everyone in my life, which is part of emotional abuse. That is part of the pattern there, is that they isolate you from everyone who could provide support or who could point out, hey, this isn't right. By the time I recognized that something wasn't right, it was like it was too late. And I think if I had more exposure to, hey, abuse is not just physical, it can be emotional. Here's what that looks like. Here's what it could sound like. I think if I had been a little more armed with some information, that I maybe could have set some different boundaries. And now I say that myself personally, I am the kind of person who I feel like I went through that and I needed to go through that. Because if I hadn't stayed in that relationship, I wouldn't have my youngest, right? So of course, I feel like I could have gotten out right after I had him. If I could do it all over again, I would have gotten out right after I had him. And I think that would have solved a lot of issues, honestly. But if there is someone out there and you find yourself in a situation that isn't right, you find yourself unable to set boundaries, you find yourself unable to see the people that you would like to see in your life, or your self-confidence is being broken down by your partner, all of these things that aren't healthy, that don't necessarily get talked about a lot. I think that would have helped me recognize it sooner than I actually did. And I didn't recognize it. So I went back to therapy, not because of my relationship. I actually went back to therapy because my grandfather went missing and I was having a lot of just things. It was a very stressful time. And this was 5 years ago. There are still emotions around that, and it's like, I needed to go to therapy to work through some of this. Of course, at that time I was reconnecting with my family because this giant traumatic event brought us kind of back together. And so I was able to reconnect with some family, but also because I went back to therapy, my therapist never said, hey, you're in an abusive relationship. She did not name that for me. What she did was point me to resources. And she would say, look, here's this information about good relationships and bad relationships. I just want you to review it and we can talk about it. Look, here's this information about setting boundaries. I just want you to review it and we can talk about it. And she would give me, something to read. She would point me to a website. She would do all of these things that was just like, we're talking about all of the stuff with your grandfather. We're talking about all this stuff with your family. We're talking about all of this stuff with work. Because at that point, she was wonderful. I love her so much. It was the best second experience with therapy I could have had. And, because she never said you're in an abusive relationship, because I think sometimes someone saying you're in this can make you just like gut reaction deny it, right? No, not me. No, absolutely not. That's not me. So because she let me realize it myself, or she helped me realize it myself. And then once I was like, oh shit, hey, I think I'm in an abusive relationship. She's like, finally. and we talked through it some more. So I think just having the information hopefully would help someone else recognize that they're in something that is unhealthy. And then also, if you are already in something that is unhealthy, it'll help you figure out how to get out of it and how to get out of it safely.
For those who are watching on Facebook, YouTube, and my social media, please subscribe, like, and share for more wonderful interviews like the one we have here with my new best friend, Momma FoxFire. And we will be back for more.